And it's Xhaka in that tumultuous encounter and controversial encounter with Crystal Palace. Okay, so Xhaka exit of shame highlights problems for Emery. That 2-2 result there, and of course the headlines made by his reaction to the reaction of the fans when he was substituted. The shirt came off, he swore at them, and it's prompted an awful lot of comments. Now, Rafa Honigstein, who's a regular on this show, took offence really at what he thought was an overreaction. He said Xhaka didn't kick anyone, didn't insult anyone. All he did was tell supporters that booing one of their players isn't on. It's precisely the point a club's captain would be expected to make. Well, not everybody on Twitter agreed with Rafa, and this was probably the most sensible response to him. Nope, said Robin Williams. I think you've missed the point. Arsenal were 2-2, needed to press for a winner. He's deliberately walked slowly across the entire pitch, wasting time, which really wound the crowd up. Should absolutely be stripped of the captaincy, he says. Okay, Darren, let's debate just the incident right now. What did you make of what happened, why it happened, the reaction, and that includes Emery's reaction to it?
Okay, well, I think it was wrong, John, to swear at the fans. That said, I've been to many games at Arsenal where the fans can really dish it out. And this isn't an Arsenal problem. I'll be very clear to make this point. It's a football problem. Fans love to dish it out, but they don't like to take it. I remember being at the North London derby 2012. Theo Walcott, horrendous stick in the first half, and then he came out in the second half, scored the last 2 goals in a 5-2 victory for Arsenal, was cheered off the pitch. Some players can take it, some can't. I think for Xhaka, the big problem is that he is struggling to cope with the pressure of playing for Arsenal. It isn't the first time he's been booed by fans. And today, on Sunday, it was breaking point. I think Emery is handling it well in so much as his focus is on the player, but I don't think the fact that neither the player nor the club have really come out and issued any kind of apology to fans. It's Wednesday now. There's been no apology to the fans for what has happened. I don't think that necessarily reflects well on the club, but I think the Xhaka's well-being is paramount, and I think he's one of a number of players who are getting this kind of stick with fans not understanding that the players are only human and there is a breaking point for everyone.
It's a very good point you make. There were a number of players left emotional by what happened, and of course a delegation of players went round to Xhaka's place after the game just to make sure he was okay. The manager did come out and say it was not acceptable what he did, but Darren's right. Let's move on now, because this is really where the story goes. This was a very good piece from Nick Ames in The Guardian saying, Xhaka, a lightning rod for Arsenal's drift under Emery. The point being, ignore the incident itself. Look at the broader implications. Why is he captain? What are the fans frustrated about? How did all this bubble away and come to pass? Let's have some more thoughts from people who have studied this situation. This is journalist Jason Burt from The Telegraph saying, on Emery allowing the Arsenal players to vote on who would be captain and choosing Xhaka, it's not that unusual in football. I remember Mourinho doing it when he first took over at Chelsea with the players voting for Terry. So, okay, there's a little bit of background as to how Xhaka was appointed. I must confess I was a little bit surprised that they would go with him because he's a hot-headed guy. But then think about who was their most recent captain. It was this guy, the one who forced his way out of the football club, who refused to go on tour. This was Laurent Koscielny, their club captain. Now, this tells us that something, Darren, is very, very wrong with a football club in terms of the way it values captaincy, deals with captaincy. Something's not right at all with the Arsenal approach. Do you agree with me?
I do agree. The key thing, John, is that Arsenal are an underachieving club and have been for many years. Some people will say that they've won a few FA Cups, but that's not what a club the size of Arsenal are about. They're about competing at the top of the Premier League. They're about competing in the Champions League. And they are about punching their way alongside the big boys. They haven't done that for many years, and for that reason, lots of clubs have wanted to leave. That's resulted in those players getting the captaincy, like Cesc Fabregas and Robin van Persie. And then you've got a player like Koscielny who wanted to leave. He had options in France, and he decided he wanted to take those options. And the club gave him tried to beg him to stay. You're the captain, you've got to be staying. But he too wanted to leave. And now, I think this reflects badly on him, John, because to give the captaincy to somebody like Xhaka, whose record has had more yellow cards than good games, and to give him that captaincy, for me, suggests, A, he doesn't know his players, and B, he is not a leader. He is struggling for leadership because the captaincy should be an obvious decision.
Yeah, I'm going to pick up on that in just a moment and go even deeper and broader than that in terms of the club itself. But feedback before we do anything else. Adnan Aini said, not a fan of Granit Xhaka, but for Arsenal fans to boo their own players, especially their captain, is the lowest low. Agreed too that Xhaka should never swear at the fans. He can't be the captain anymore, and I doubt he'll want to play for Arsenal beyond January. Zafran wrote in saying, as a captain, Xhaka should have known better on how to handle the situation, keeping his head down, working hard, and proving haters wrong. It's sad to see a team captain facing this problem. Now, Darren made the point there, and it's a good one, because remember, this is Arsenal, the club of Tony Adams and Patrick Vieira, two of the greatest captains we've seen in English football. Yet, if we go back over their last 8 captains, now remember William Gallas sitting in a sulk in the centre circle at Birmingham. Not a great example. Now, Fabregas had some great moments as captain, but remember, he was still engineering a move back to Barcelona as he was captain. Van Persie, yeah, a fabulous season as captain, but then off he went to Old Trafford. Vermaelen, he suffered really with injuries. It was difficult for him to maintain a spot in the football team, and that became a bit of a theme. Arteta, recognised as a great leader, and he will be a great manager by all accounts, but didn't play an awful lot. Per Mertesacker, again, valued highly as a leader of men and therefore used by Arsenal in that regard, but not really someone leading on the pitch. And then we came to Koscielny, who we've spoken about, and now Granit Xhaka. I think in a way, Darren, what this does is this begins to make me look at the structure above the coach or, the head coach or the manager at the football club. Institutionally, this wasn't the Arsenal way. The Arsenal way, as I said, with Adams and Vieira, was to identify somebody who would lead by example, pull a team together on the pitch, right?
Yeah, well, there was a different management structure then. There was autonomy for George Graham before him and Arsene Wenger when he came to the club. Now we have a different setup. And above Emery, the recruitment, John, has been poor. They needed another centre-half, a commanding centre-half in the summer. They didn't get one. They needed a commanding central midfielder. They didn't get one. They conceded 51 goals last season. So they needed to deal with issues that would have helped the team to push on. But I say again, because the team is underachieving, you get all of those players like Van Persie, like Fabregas, who want to go to more successful clubs. Then you've got Vermaelen who wants to go to Barcelona. You've got players who don't want to be there anymore. And the reasons they don't want to be there is because the club aren't addressing the issues they should, the manager isn't showing enough leadership, and as a whole, the club are drifting. I think there are more problems to come at Arsenal, and the lack of leadership when the going gets tough is going to really harm them going forward.
Yeah, leadership on many, many levels. Great stuff, Darren. Thank you very much. Now, we're going to broaden the conversation to leadership in general. Now, without going to any search engines, between now and the time we come back, have a think about who the club captains might be at all 20 of those, specifically looking at Arsenal so far, but we'll broaden it to the guys that we think maybe are the best captains, and we've picked 4 of them of the 20 Premier League clubs operating right now. Give us your thoughts on captaincy. Anything to do with now, maybe in the past as well, as it's your show, remember, and we're back with you in just a few seconds' time. Or download the free Standard Chartered Stand Red app via the Apple App Store or Google Play Store now. And it's a good time to check out anything to do with Liverpool right now. You might have noticed the competition we ran on the show on Friday. Get along to foxsportsasia.com and find out more about how you can win a trip to Anfield. Right, okay, let's turn our attention right now to captaincy on a broad level, right? Remember I asked you, who are those club captains? 10 clubs right now, and we'll go through 10 in just a moment. Club captain, remember, doesn't always mean you play all the time, okay? So that's why it's Chester, Villa, Francis Dunk, me, Azpilicueta, Milivojevic, Baines at Everton there. Wes Morgan is Leicester's. Henderson, we'll talk about him in just a moment, is at Liverpool. On we go. Did you get Silva at the top of the show? Come on, be honest. I think we all knew Young, didn't we? Lascelles has been there at Newcastle for a while. Grant Hanley, Norwich. Billy Sharp's not playing a lot, but of course club legend at Sheffield United. Højbjerg, who had plenty to say about the 9-0 the other day. Lloris, Deeney, Noble and Connor Cody at Wolves. You'll notice the vice captains were there because very often you see that the guy who has to take over the armband is the guy who actually gets the game. Listen, it's not necessarily a quiz night, but I don't think many of you will have known, if I'd asked you fresh, all 20 of those. The point we're making is this. Where are the captains? Where are the really identifiable captains, the leaders? Let's get into the 4 that we've picked that we think are the ones who are the strongest captains. We're going to start off with Jordan Henderson. Now, the contradiction, of course, came this weekend that we saw the Xhaka situation, and we saw Henderson scoring a vital goal, leading by example, if you will. And Liverpool fans, I think, will sometimes accept, as you can see here, Liverpool's beating heart Henderson makes up for lost time to break Tottenham. That was Barney Ronay's report from that win against Spurs. I think Liverpool fans will sometimes accept, Darren Lewis of the Mirror, who's with us as tonight's guest, that you don't always have to be the best player. Not everyone's going to be a Steven Gerrard. In Henderson's case, he doesn't always find himself guaranteed a place in that three-man midfield. But he's quite clearly the captain in that group, isn't he?
He is. He's got a lot of respect at Liverpool. And, you know, I think he epitomises something about that club. When he arrived, he didn't have the profile of Gerrard. There were lots of people who didn't think he was good enough to succeed Steven Gerrard. And he's worked tremendously hard to keep his place and to push on. And I think that epitomises what Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool are all about. Because when he lifted the Champions League last season, Liverpool fans recognised what it meant to him. A guy who had, when he arrived, had so much stick, so much criticism, so many disparaging remarks about his ability. And he was able to confound them all, just as Liverpool were able to confound their doubters and get all the way to the top of European football once again.
Very good point. We've also seen a bit of a spark from Henderson. Remember last year there was that thing where he didn't shake Klopp's hand on the touchline, and as a result of that there was a little bit of friction. We've seen him demonstrating a little bit of spark, aggression as well. So he's really grown into that captain's role. Let's talk about West Ham's captain, Mark Noble. Now, he's a fascinating story, is Mark Noble. He's the classic one through and through, West Ham. I worked with Mark a couple of times when they were transitioning from their old stadium, Upton Park, into the new one in Stratford. And he did an awful lot of work that I was witnessing firsthand, where he spoke to fans, where he went out to fan groups, where he did sponsored events and what have you. He's a tremendous ambassador for the football club. But what was fascinating is the way he, as a player, has reinvented himself and regained his place in the midfield where it might have been under threat from the likes of Jack Wilshere. This is a really interesting one, this, Darren, because under Pellegrini, I thought Mark was losing his way. About a year ago, suddenly things turned around and he became a key performer for them once again. He, for me, is almost the ultimate captain for a club, isn't he?
He is indeed. I've spoken to Mark many times. He epitomises. He is Mr. West Ham. He is a guy who knows the values, the attitudes that local people embody, and he sets a standard for the players around him in terms of what is demanded from them for the team. And I spoke to many of the foreign players who have joined the club who have been very fulsome in their praise of Mark Noble and the way he helps them to adapt, the way he reminds them of what certain fixtures mean to the fans, and the way that he copes with not always getting picked, but understanding that the team comes first. So there are many, many reasons why Mark Noble is key to everything that West Ham do. And, of course, when he does play, he leads by example.
Now, our next one that we've picked is someone who literally got the job because he showed the kind of spirit to have a go at his teammates. This is Jamal Lascelles we're talking about here. Now, Jamal Lascelles is a fascinating customer here because he got the armband off Rafa Benitez at the age of 22. He's still only, 25? And this was really interesting because Rafa Benitez, in a difficult time, in a difficult job, in a dressing room that had problems, recognised that a guy who was prepared to call out his teammates was someone who he wanted to be his captain. If we take a little look at Jamal, and we can do this, Darren, as you're talking about him here, he's somebody who has actually signed a new contract that will keep him at the football club till 2024. He's captained them since August 2016, yet, you know, he's only 25 years old. Remarkable, really, that someone would have that strength and personality, really, to put his hand up for a job in a difficult environment.
And that says a lot about him as a player. Courageous, a lot of leadership, a guy who's very articulate and kind of sets the standard. I keep using that word standard because that's what leaders should do. And I think as far as Lascelles is concerned, well, I know West Ham tried to sign him on a couple of occasions, and he could have jumped ship from a Newcastle. Well, the club has been a really unsteady ship over the last few years or so, and he is a rising star. He could have gone to the higher profile environment of West Ham, but he chose to stay, and that in itself is a wonderful display of leadership and in stark contrast to some of the players you mentioned, John, at Arsenal, like Fabregas, like Van Persie, like the players who wanted to go to Barcelona, like Vermaelen. Lascelles is a wonderful example of commitment and courage under fire, and a good example to the other players at Newcastle. And perhaps that's why they're having a little bit of a renaissance.
OK, now we turn our attention to Crystal Palace's captain, Luka Milivojevic. And for the first time, I think, ever on this show, I'm going to feature a headline from a Serbian publication. Because when I think about Milivojevic, as does anyone who is involved in fantasy Premier League gameplay, you think about penalties. This guy is a guaranteed penalty scorer. And that's what this one here, penalty or punishment. This was an article about a year ago talking about his remarkable form in which he just seems to put away every penalty he's asked to. Now, that for me is leading by example. Tight game, captain steps up, captain scores. He takes the responsibility. Now, one thing that's amazing about this guy is if you look at the Premier League's all-time top goal scorers from the penalty spot, Frank Lampard leads with 32, but he made 609 appearances. Then you go through Gerrard, Aguero, Noble, Rooney, and you get to Milivojevic, still shy of 100 appearances, just 97, yet he's on 21. And he will, if he sticks around, overhaul all of these guys in an incredibly fast time. But Darren, the other thing that interests me about this is actually in 7th place is Leighton Baines, who we mentioned earlier on as Everton's captain. You've got Mark Noble there. You've got these other guys, Lampard and Gerrard. You know, captaincy and penalty taking, they go hand in hand because there's no better way of taking responsibility and leading by example than that, is there?
Absolutely. You know, a lot has changed, not just about football, but the way we think about football and write about football. But one thing that hasn't changed is that in tough moments, you want your leaders to step up. That's what Milivojevic does on a regular basis, digging his team out of trouble. And that's why he is a wonderful leader for Crystal Palace. And, you know, it might even be why they're still in the Premier League, because they've got leadership like the kind he provides. Yeah, excellent stuff. Well, look, they're the 4 that we picked. I mean, you know, you're entitled to disagree with any of them. You're entitled to suggest your others between now and the end of the show. Axe has been in touch saying Henderson might not be as gifted as Gerrard, but he works hard, stands by his teammates on the pitch, leads by example. As a Liverpool supporter, I seriously rate him a better captain than Gerrard. That's interesting. Oh, that's interesting. Better captain than Gerrard. OK, we'll take a break, and Darren and I are going to ponder that one during the break. When we come back, we'll have some more thoughts on what we've just been talking about. We're also going to go to the likes of Gerrard and the likes of John Terry, the modern-day greats. What makes a great captain? I just want to quickly point out that in Europe, basically, if you've been at a club a long time, you're going to be the captain, aren't you? Look at these greats here, from Maldini to Totti to Puyol to Zanetti. Captain forever. Forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And that, Darren Lewis, who's my guest on the show today, is really a model that I think, you know, in so many ways in Europe, we understand, don't we? You know, you're a legend, you're a long-serving guy at the club, you're going to be the captain. Sometimes it leads to a problem, like Sinisa Mihajlovic, who was long-serving, but not really the right kind of person to be your captain. But Lazio somehow managed that, didn't they? Yeah, they did, and I'm looking at all of those pictures. You know, you've got Puyol in the shot, and you've got I think I saw Maldini there as well, and Totti. I mean, these guys. One word we haven't used so far, John, is consistency. And not only have they been mainstays in the side, but their performances have been consistent as well. That's why they've been such permanent fixtures, and that's why they've gone on to become legends. Now, let's talk about the English example in terms of the iconic Premier League captains. So Gerrard for 12 years. We've got Vieira there for that 3-year spell, but boy, he was iconic. Keane, obviously a lot longer there before things went a bit sour. Tony Adams, wow, what a legend. Again, a relatively short period, but, well, sorry, a long period. Chelsea, John Terry, Vincent Kompany there at Manchester City. So let's just quickly get some feedback away before Darren and I draw some conclusions about the nature of captaincy, what works for people. Adrian Leung, don't see a Keane, Vieira, Gerrard who embody their team in current Premier League teams. The last one was Kompany. That's right. That's why we put him on the list. So Darren, let's start drawing some conclusions here. All of those things there, I would say, looking at that, you don't get a great team without a great captain. And most clubs that have enjoyed an awful lot of success, there's been a strongly identifiable captain during that period. Do you agree with me? I absolutely agree with you. You look at Manchester United, you look at Chelsea, John Terry, of course, Liverpool and Steven Gerrard are synonymous. Roy Keane and Manchester United, Tony Adams in the shot there. Every time there are issues with players, captains at Arsenal, he is the reference point. And I think the armband in Premier League history has been synonymous at the big clubs, the successful clubs, with players who are either committed in terms of embodying the values of the club, inspirational in terms of their performances, or consistent. And I think all of the shots that we're seeing now are of players who embody all of those attributes.
But Darren, just to wrap this up, we can't be too insular, we can't be too Anglo-centric, because there's a different flavour to football clubs, maybe embodied by Manchester City at the moment. We're post-company right now. They voted Silva in. You know, they say we've got that many players on the pitch. We are just a manifestation on the pitch of what Pep Guardiola is telling us to do from the sidelines. Even Gareth Southgate basically has a core leadership committee, doesn't he? And he's almost like a middle manager in so many ways, Gareth. So it's not all about having that one guy. I mean, times have moved on, haven't they?
Yes, indeed. But at both those clubs, there is strength at the top in terms of leadership. So it is easy to establish those committees. I think the problem with Arsenal is there isn't that strength of leadership at the top. That's why